Okay. All right, so this problem says round to the nearest tenth and solve. You have 14 and 84 hundredths plus 7 and 1,888 ten thousandths. The first thing we need to do is to find the tenths place in both numbers. So in 14 and 84 hundredths, where would the tenths place be? The 8. The 8 is in the tenths place. Now let's move over to the 7 and 1,888 ten thousandths. Where would the tenths place be? 1. The 1 is in the tenths place. The tenths place is always the number that is right after the decimal. Okay, so now that we know where the tenths place is, the next thing we need to do is look to see what number is behind the tenths place, because that's going to let us know if the number is rounded up or if it stays the same. So I'm going to draw an arrow that goes from the tenths place to the number behind it. If the number behind the place that I'm rounding is a 5 or higher, then the number is going to be pushed up. If it is below a 5, then the number being rounded is going to stay the same. So let's look at 14 and 84 hundredths. The number we're rounding is an 8, and the number behind it is a 4. Does the 8 stay an 8, or does it round up to a 9? It stays an 8 because this number is a 4, and in order for it to move up, it would have to be a 5. So now that we know that this is going to stay an 8, we write all the numbers before the 8 the same. So 14 decimal. We said the 8 stays the same. And then any number after the number that you're rounding turns to a 0. So this 4 becomes a 0. Now we're going to move over to this number, the 1. The number behind the 1 is an 8. Is the 1 going to stay a 1, or will it be pushed up to the next number, which is a 2? It will be pushed up to a 2 because 8 is a number that is strong. It's higher than a 5. So I write every number before the number around just like it was. The 1 is now going to become a 2. And every number after the number that I've rounded changes to a 0. So this 8 becomes a 0. This 8 becomes a 0. This 8 becomes a 0. Okay. Now we have rounded both numbers. Now it's time to add. When you add numbers with decimals, please do not leave them like this. Line the numbers up so that you don't make any mistakes. So we're going to write the 2 decimals. And this number, a 1 and a 4, comes before the decimal, and after is an 8 and a 0. In the second number, only a 7 comes before the decimal, and it is exactly right before the decimal. After the decimal is a 2, 0, 0, 0. Now, this looks a little funny because we're not used to adding numbers that are not lined up from the right side, but that's okay. As long as these are lined up, then we're doing okay. If it bothers you that there's nothing here, you can put zeros in the spot, and it does not change the number. So let's add 0 plus 0, 0 plus 0, 0 plus 0, 8 plus 2, 10. So I'm going to put my 0 down and carry my 1. 1 plus 4 is 5, and then 5 plus 7 is 12. So I'm going to put my 2 down and carry my 1. 1 plus 1, 2. So now I've added all my numbers. The last thing that I need to do is bring down my decimal, and it goes straight down. And that is how you estimate sums. Number 9's directions say estimate difference. Difference means that you're going to estimate and then subtract. So you had 7 and 86/100 minus 2 and 9/10. If it does not tell us what number to round to, then that means we're going to just choose the first number on the left side. So in this number, it would have been the 7, and in this number, it would be the 2 that we're going to round. When you are deciding if a number stays the same or if it goes up, you need to look at the number behind it. So 7's friend or number behind it is an 8, and 2's friend or number behind it is a 9. If a number behind the number that we're rounding is higher than a 5, then the number that is being rounded moves up. If the number behind the number being rounded is less than 5, then the number rounded stays the same. So 7's friend behind him is an 8. That 8 is higher than a 5, so it's going to make the 7 move up to an 8. And then everything after the number being rounded is going to change to a 0. So 7 and 86/100 is now 8. To round the second number, it's a 2. The number behind it is a 9. 9 is a larger number than 5, so it's going to make this 2 become a 3. The 9 is after the number being rounded, so we change it to a 0. Make sure that you line up your decimals. And the original problem was to subtract, so now I'm going to subtract. Now, before we have been taught to line our numbers up from the right side, and this may look a little awkward to you. If it bothers you that they're not lined up in the back, you can just put a little 0 there. It's still the same. It doesn't change the value. So 0 minus 0 is 0. 0 minus 0 is 0. 8 minus 3 is 5. Bring down your decimal. So 7 and 86/100 minus 2 and 9/10 rounded or estimated is going to be 5.00. Is there another way that I can write 5.00? 5. 5.00 is the same thing as 5. Okay, in this problem, it tells us to estimate and solve. It does not tell us what place value we need to round the numbers to. If it doesn't tell us the place value to round to, we always use the first digit of the number. So for 12 and 917 thousandths, we're going to round the first digit, which would be the 1. And in 7 and 29 hundredths, we're going to round the 7, because the 7 is the first digit in the number. Now, when we are rounding, we always look at the number behind the number that is being rounded. So if we want to round the 1, we need to look at the 2 to decide if it's going to round up or if it's going to stay the same. If the number behind the number being rounded is a 5 or higher, the number being rounded goes up. If the number behind the number being rounded is less than a 5, the number being rounded is going to stay the same. So in this problem, or in this number, the number behind the number being rounded is a 2. Is 2 big enough to make the 1 go up, or is it going to stay the same? It will stay the same. So we're going to draw an arrow, and then we're going to write the new number. The 1 stays the same, and every number after the number being rounded must change to a 0. So the 2 becomes a 0, decimal, the 9 becomes a 0, the 1 becomes a 0, and the 7 becomes a 0. Now let's move to the second number, 7. In order to round the 7, we need to look at what is behind it. There is a 2 behind the 7. 2 is less than 5. So what is that going to do to the 7? Will it make it go up to an 8 or will it make it stay the same? It will stay a 7. So draw an arrow, line your decimal up. The 7 is right before the decimal, so we're going to put the 7 there. It stays the same. And anything after the number being rounded becomes a 0. So the 2 will be a 0 and the 9 will be a 0. So now all we have to do is subtract. Now normally we're not used to seeing an empty space on the right side when we're subtracting. So if that bothers you, go ahead and put a small 0 there to let yourself know that that is actually 0. If there's nothing there, then nothing is 0. So you can put a 0 there. And now we're going to subtract. 0 minus 0. 0. 0 minus 0. 0. 0 minus 0. 0. Here we go. 0 minus 7. I cannot do that. So I need to borrow from the 1. That becomes a 0. And now this 0 becomes a 10. What is 10 minus 7? 3. Bring down your decimal. So the answer is 3.000, but we don't read that 3.000. We just read that as 3. So we could also write it 3.